Living in Southern California probably did play a role in my decision to become a filmmaker. I had started out to be an engineer, following in my father's footsteps. And I think the lure of motion pictures and the fact that when I had gone to school, the parents of some of my friends worked in the film industry, and just the general interest, excitement, and glamour of the film industry as such drew me. When I started, Hollywood was very highly unionized, and it was very difficult to get a job. So I came out of Stanford with a degree in engineering and got a job riding a bicycle delivering messages. And at that time, the studios worked 6 days a week in shooting, but the office employees worked 5. So I volunteered to work a 6th day for nothing if I could be on the set and observe and learn. And they said yes, and I did observe and learn, and also part of my plan was that they would be aware that I was an eager young guy, and I got promoted to be a reader in the story department. I was called a story analyst. It was sort of an attempt to make us feel as if we were more important than we were. They had been looking for an offbeat Western for Gregory Peck, and I had remembered a script that I'd covered called The Big Gun that I thought was pretty good. And I wrote a revision of the script and handed it in, and they liked it, and the picture was made based upon my revisions, and the head of the story department got a bonus for his great work on the script, so I left Fox.
Sit in this chair and I'll pose you.
How's this pose?
Oh, that's fine. It's very good. Just stay like that.
It doesn't look like very much clay.
Oh, it's enough. Put this around your neck.
In 1954, Corman wrote his first screenplay, The House and the Sea, which eventually was changed to Highway Dragnet. He proceeded to sell the screenplay to Allied artists, where he gained valuable training as a producer.
Highway Dragnet was a turning point for me. I had had several jobs knocking around town. I'd been a stagehand at Channel 13. At that time, I was a literary agent, and I wrote the script, which I called The House in the Sea, which became Highway Dragnet, based upon a trip I had taken to the Salton Sea. The Salton Sea is overflowing its banks in the desert, and I saw all of these old houses that were deserted, and the first floor was flooded. And I thought it would be a great climax to a picture, some sort of a chase across the desert in a shootout in a flooded house. And so I started with the climax of the film and worked back to create my story. When I sold the script of The House in the Sea, I asked to go along as an associate producer for no salary on the basis I would learn, and at the same time I could get a credit as associate producer. So when the film ended, I was able to set myself up as a writer-producer.
Corman's first film as an independent producer was called Monster from the Ocean Floor, which he made on a shoestring budget, using money from the sale of Highway Dragnet and money he borrowed from some college friends.
I had a little office which was actually the reception office for an agent who didn't have very much money, and I operated out of that. I took the money from the sale of the script of The House in the Sea, and then borrowed money from various classmates from college, putting together actually $12,000 in cash and a laboratory deferment to bring it up to $18,000, and shot the picture in 6 days in the coast of Malibu. I was surprisingly confident. If I were to do it now, I would be very worried that I could do it. But I think at the age of 25 or whatever I was, you have ambition and confidence, and you will do things that when you're older and smarter, you wouldn't do.
Roger is an interesting blend of, sort of businessman and audience advocate. And he believes that if he can make an entertaining movie for a price, that's an unbeatable formula. Given that parameter, he is all for trying to deliver something that's fun to watch.
Perhaps the biggest break in Corman's early career came when he began his affiliation with Jim Nicholson and Sam Arkoff of American Releasing Company, which eventually became American International Pictures. Together, this team produced successful picture after picture, sometimes cranking them out in only a matter of days.
Monster from the Ocean Floor, which I originally called It Stalked the Ocean Floor, but the distributors thought that title was too arty, so they changed it to Monster from the Ocean Floor. Anyway, Monster did start my career as a producer. I took the money from that and did a road racing action film called The Fast and the Furious. I had several offers from major studios for the film, but I realized that the trap for an independent producer was you made a picture and then you waited a long time to get your money back, so you couldn't make very many films. And what I wanted to do was to get an advance back immediately to make a series of films. So I went with a new company, which was at that time called American Releasing, run by Jim Nicholson and Sam Arkoff. And I told them I would give them the film if they would give me all of my money back immediately as an advance against distribution and do the same thing on 3 more films so I could set myself up as a producer. They were happy to do that because The Fast and the Furious enabled them to start their company, and it then meant that I would be a steady supplier of films for them so the company could get rolling.
Hold it right there, mister.
Angie Dickinson, his big bad mama.
My mother's still got some rights in this country.
Hey, you can't do that.
The hell I can't.
Paradise, Texas, 1932.
We're gonna have everything we ever wanted.
Prosperity was just around the corner, at the nearest bank.
Get the money! Like John D. Rockefeller said, you gotta grasp the dynamics of money and keep the currency on the move.
My early films, and probably many of my current films, were what were called exploitation films, and I see nothing wrong with the statement. As a matter of fact, when Steven Spielberg did Jaws, Vincent Canby wrote in the New York Times, "What is Jaws but a big-budget Roger Corman film?" What happened subsequently is that the major studios began making the type of exploitation film I had been making, but of course they made them bigger, and I must admit they made them better.
Corman's first film as a director was the 1955 release of 5 Guns West, starring John Lund, Mike Connors, and Dorothy Malone.
The first film I directed was a Western called 5 Guns West. I shot it on a 9-day schedule at a ranch in the San Fernando Valley. I was very, very nervous. I had been very confident about my work as a producer, but as soon as I made the transition from producer to director, I became very, very shaky. All I could do was shoot in the morning and stare at the script and study it and try to figure out what to do in the afternoon.
Fast relief. Take the candy-striped nurses and go straight to bed. The New World Pictures, rated R.
The normal schedule for low-budget films in the 1950s was 10 days, simply 2 5-day weeks. And that was what I normally did. I undercut that a couple of times. I did Bucket of Blood in 5 days, and I did Little Shop of Horrors in 2 days and a night, really as an experiment and as a joke to see if I could do it. And I remember Bob Towne, who went on to be an Academy Award-winning screenwriter, was a good friend of mine. When I finished, Bob said, "You must remember, Roger, making a film is not like a track meet. It's not how fast you go." And I said, "You're right, Bob. I'll never make a film in 2 days again."
Eat me! Oh, take it easy, Dracula. What do you think I'm carrying here, my dirty laundry? I'm coming already. This should be enough for anybody.
You know, it's interesting because my kids were watching the musical version of Little Shop of Horrors on video, and I sort of was watching that, and I thought it all goes back to the extraordinary, unique, particular kind of sense of humor that tickled Roger Corman. Nobody else, nobody in the world would have made a little tiny movie called The Little Shop of Horrors, which is such an amazing idea to begin with. He's the one. He just was an amazing trendsetter. So just on the conceptual level, he brought so much to the party. And then often in terms of picking people, I mean, Jack Nicholson, did any number of movies with Roger, and not only as an actor, but also as a writer, as a second unit director, and what have you. It's just incalculable. No one, I don't think anybody can match up.
My name is Wilberforce.
Wilberforce what?
Just Wilberforce. My first name is Wilbur. My last name is Force. I don't have a middle name.
Well, you have an appointment, maybe?
No, but you were very highly recommended to me by one of your patients, Mrs. Eshiva. I do a lot of undertaking for her relatives.
Well, as you can see, I have a customer now, and I'm all booked up for the rest of the day, so you'll have to come back tomorrow.
Oh, I couldn't do that. I have 3 or 4 abscesses, a touch of pyorrhea, 9 or 10 cavities. I lost my pivot tooth, and I'm in terrible pain.
I've come to see Madeline.
That is quite impossible. She is confined to her bed.
Mr. Usher, your sister and I are betrothed.
It was a mistake.
I don't believe that.
Please don't argue with me, sir. You must leave this house now.
I've made just about every type of film there is, but I've made many horror films. I don't know why. I think anybody who's working in a creative medium is working partially out of their conscious mind and partially out of their unconscious. There probably is something somewhere in the back of my mind that makes me fascinated with fantasy, science fiction, and particularly horror.
Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door, only this and nothing more. Distinctly, I remember it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow. Vainly I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here forevermore.
The Poe films were shot almost entirely on sound stages. I had always had many theories. Right or wrong, the theories were there about how I made my films. And I felt the Poe films, being psychological horror stories, represented the unconscious mind, and I should shoot in an artificial environment because the unconscious mind didn't see reality. So I shot all of them except one, which I just changed because I got tired of my own theory, on sound stages. And I wanted to change and shoot on natural locations. At that time, the Hells Angels were very much in the news. And I saw a picture, I think in either Time or Newsweek, about the funeral of a Hells Angel in which all the bikers were on motorcycles with the coffin going to the graveyard.
meant to do this movie in 10 days for, like I said, $300,000 or less, about $285,000. Roger started hiring pieces of various outlaw motorcycle gangs that agreed to supply their bike, themselves, and their girlfriend, their old lady. Well, he had a bunch of actors and myself and Jack Nicholson and Dennis Hopper and Peter and other people that were around that were willing to go along with that. We loved it. We were actors that were interested in realism and just being real and being the people. So you surround us with Hell's Angels, that was fine with us. We weren't afraid of them or anything.
Hey, what you doing home so early?
I don't like nobody getting uptight with me, man. And that includes you.
Blap. Huh? Blues? What's the matter with him?
Oh, nothing, man. You know, his foreman got uptight. The mother doesn't like him getting messages at work.
So what did he do? Fire him?
Yeah, the fool fired me. He hassled my mind, man. You don't ever get a straight deal around here. Are you kidding?
That's 4 jobs in 5 months. We're never going to get this place fixed up.
Who cares?
I wish we could all have the 2020 vision of hindsight when we're doing things, because I did not know how important the film would become. I had no idea. I had a theater owner get in touch with me to say, I'd like to feature your movies one night in my theater, and I'd like to do a retrospective, and I want to use... I couldn't wait to hear what he was going to say. I mean, what epic film. The Ghost in the Invisible Bikini. He said, I would like to do The Last of the Secret Agents and The Wild Angels. And, you know, who knew? Who knew? But he feels it's important enough to do a little art house thing about it.
What's eating you?
What's eating you, you mean?
The loser.
The loser? Oh, I thought you were sore at me.
What for?
Because of ugly. I thought you were thinking that I was... well, because the way I used to be and all, you know. I just figured that you thought I...
You talk too much.
I remember I asked him, I said, Roger, how many movies have you done? And he said, 100. That didn't really make me comprehend a whole lot until later in the day, and I thought to myself, is that right? He said 100? He's 35 years old, and he said 100 movies? He's made 100 movies? Well, I mean, I'm sure they were every kind of movie. He'd been making movies since he was 8 years old, probably. But he had made 100 movies that were, you know, released.
Soon the world will awake to a terrifying riptide of humanoids from the deep.
We think we know where these things come from, but we have no idea how many there are.
The Earth plunges into a battle for the survival of the fittest, where man is the endangered species and woman the ultimate prize. Anywhere you run, any place you hide, anytime you stop, they will find you. Doug McClure, Ann Turkel, Vic Morrow. Humanoids from the deep.
Early in 1970, I was in Ireland directing a World War I flying picture called Von Richthofen and Brown. I was so tired, I barely made it through that film. And I said to myself, I will complete this film, but I'm going to take a year off and then come back to directing. I took the year off, but to keep myself busy, I soon got bored. I decided to start a distribution company, which became New World Pictures. New World got off to such a fast start that within a year and a half, we were the biggest independent distribution company in the United States. We were almost competing with the majors. They knew who we were. They were aware of our distribution schedules, but even with our great position of #1 as the independents, we couldn't really challenge the major studios.
Corman is certainly known for his extensive list of alumni. He has given many of Hollywood's most outstanding directors, actors, writers, and producers their first break in the industry. Among the actors who have worked with Corman over the years are Sylvester Stallone, Jack Nicholson, Ellen Burstyn, David Carradine, Robert De Niro, Bruce Dern, Jennifer Love Hewitt, Diane Ladd, and many others.
He could afford to give tons of actors a lead in a picture. And it was a Roger Corman who was kind of like everybody's angel. He opened the door for us to get that almost impossible first opportunity.
A number of actors have gone on to acclaim and Academy Award stardom have started with me. Jack Nicholson, Bobby De Niro, Sylvester Stallone, Charlie Bronson, Peter Fonda, a number of people. I think one of the reasons I was able to find young actors of this talent is the fact that I studied acting myself as part of my preparation for directing, and I believed in going with the best actor available irregardless of their name value in these films. So I was able to find and use good young actors when other people were either afraid to give them a chance or were playing it safe and taking actors of a little greater name value.
It wasn't as if it was just actors. I mean, we had Francis Coppola was an AD, Peter Bogdanovich was a second, did all the second unit camera work on The Wild Angels. A few years later, he'd get guys like Joe Dante and Mike Fennell and Jonathan Demme and Dan Haller, and all these guys who went on to become big directors on their own were all guys that came to Hollywood hoping to, gosh, they got a chance to work for Roger Corman.
Most of the directors who started their careers with me started as an assistant and worked up. I did sense something special in all of these directors. I was unable to predict that they would rise to the heights they would, but they had the three attributes I looked for. They were all intelligent, they all were willing to work very hard, and they had then that intangible, the creative spark, that they brought something new and original to the work.